Welcome to the second part of our mini tech summit. We've already flogged through what happened in 2012. Now we're asking our distinguished panel to get their crystal balls out and look at the trends that are coming up over the next few months. Also a chance for us to find out if they can think of anything new and different to say. Emma, what's the big thing for you?
Wow. I think definitely the big thing for me is the ability for people to communicate and comment and rate. And I think the big thing for next year is going to be the effect on the industry of the reviewers, because the power of the reviewer in 2012 went from here to here, and I think in 2013 it's actually going to really shape how people consume technology and how people decide not just about technology, you know, obviously where they go on holiday and where they go to eat and all this stuff, but I think that is going to be the greatest effector, if that's a word, for technology in 2013.
You're a gadget man, Adam. What do you see as the big trends? I mean, are we going to more rise of Apple, or are we going to see people get fed up with having to pay $650 for an iPhone when there's plenty of other good phones around?
Well, I think we're going to see even more emphasis on smartphones. So I think smartphones are going to move to being kind of the central point, is where people are going to put them in their propositions. We're going to see even more companies entering with smartphones that we haven't seen already. So we're going to see perhaps new propositions from Microsoft and for other companies like Amazon coming into this market and being the central point to control the consumer's digital lifestyle. And from we're going to see the smartphone being kind of embedded amongst other things, so your TV viewing, your tablet usage, and all of those things being used in concert together, centrally being built around the smartphone, and that's what we're going to see.
Who are going to be the corporate winners and losers? Is Apple going to stay on top, or is its star beginning to wane?
I think Apple are going to have a tough job ahead of them, staying relevant. They've got a time. They've had their proposition around iOS has been in the market for some time. It's beginning to look a bit dated, so there's definitely going to be a desire to see something different from then, from a consumer perspective, and that's going to place pressure on them. They're going to have to, at some point, maybe not next year, but break with the old and start with the new, and that's going to have an effect on developers and all sorts of other ecosystems. And there's lots of other companies now. Microsoft are going to be really trying, now they've got their Windows 8 story out there, spent most of 2012 building the story around Windows 8, but 2013 is going to be a year where we're going to see products in the marketplace.
Well, this talk of gadget probably seems a bit low level for you, doesn't it? Robotics, what are the big trends there?
I think the Windows 8 story is a really interesting one, because Windows 8 is not Android and it is not iOS. It's actually a bridge between desktop and touch-driven devices, which nobody else is really doing. Now, this has potential to either fail disastrously or to actually change the whole game. Everybody knows you can't really do word processing on your tablet. Surface is different, it has a keyboard. Is that something that people want? It could go either way. I think that could be the really interesting story at the end of the year. You might find Surface doing really well.
So what about in your own area, robotics? What are the big things coming up?
Big things coming up, I think, ways that we can interact with people. Connect is an interesting one, sensing what people's gestures are, much better voice recognition. You've already seen Siri. Once you start tying that in with good face recognition, you can match the voice to the mouth moving. You can do voice recognition in noisy environments. This changes the whole thing. You know, voice recognition up to date has been a bit of a joke. You know, it always gets it wrong, and you're going to start seeing that changing, and it's getting impressively good.
You run a company that sets out to make humanoid robots. Is that something we're actually going to see? And if so, are we going to see it over the next 12 months?
You're already seeing it more than you did. You know, the future's already here, you just haven't seen it yet. The fact that it's not in the room doesn't mean it's not there. You're going to see more of it. There are good commercial applications for robotics now. We're now getting a lot of interest from corporates that we never saw a year or two ago. Suddenly people go, actually, this is a really good way to communicate. You can talk to people as people, you can make eye contact, you can use expressions that people understand. You don't have to use keyboard, ASCII code and touch swipes. You know, this is a language that everybody's born with, they don't have to learn it. And that's the key thing, to talk to your technology, to interact with your technology in your native tongue, as it were.
talking about the Connect technology and people sort of getting used to gesturing at their television and then it responding, and then that kind of, so it's probably been driven a bit more by gaming rather than robotics, which I think the knock-on effect is.
I think what we haven't seen yet with that technology are the killer apps to come from it, and also it needs to shrink. We need to see infrared motion sensors in tablets, we need to see them in smartphones, and that's starting to happen. And when you shrink the technology to that size, all kinds of other possibilities open up.
I think the gaming thing is interesting because I think most of these technologies need a channel to come to market, and they need some proof point, and I think the game was just a really good way for people to understand what this was and have a use case to attach to it, to adopt it, and then once it's there, it then can get co-opted to use, and people familiar with it, co-opted by, you know, by different third-party developers or whatever, to be used for different use cases.
I mean, one of the most ugly bits of jargon I've heard in recent months is appification. I'm not quite sure what it is, but is that what you see happening to computing? Apps are taking over from more conventional computing frameworks for doing things.
Like we're seeing even apps being used in the first instance for a lot of web services, which would previously just have gone online. Now, obviously, sort of the appification is the fact that with those services, you're rolling out your Android app, your iOS app, and your Windows app as well into that. And I think we're just going to see more of that.
But is that going to change the way people do their computing? Essentially, they won't be interacting directly with the web. They'll be doing everything.
I think it already has. I think the thing that we're starting to see more of is a return of the web and using more web-based interfaces, web-based technologies to deliver services that aren't in fact applications. So I'm here talking about HTML5, which is a kind of web standard that we're going to see a lot more. So it's still not yet standardised, but we're going to see more uptake of it throughout next year.
I think the HTML5 story is a really big one. 1/3 of developers are currently porting apps to a different platform. So the Android.
Why HTML5 matters so much?
It's an extension. HTML, hypertext markup language. It's the language that browsers speak. It lays out your text on the screen and your pictures. That's in HTML5. Greatly extended. It can now handle video. It can handle 3D graphics, WebGL. You've got all kinds of things that happen in the browser. This doesn't rely on iOS, Windows, Android. This is something separate from the operating system that happens in the browser, which means if you can code in HTML5 and be sure that it'll work, you only have to do it once.
I've heard a bit about trends that you think are welcome and progressive trends. What about things that might happen, like a couple of gadget makers go out of business, perhaps? I mean, how we can see with BlackBerry and Nokia. I mean, not maybe at that sort of level, very serious, but obviously they're struggling a bit.
The companies that are struggling are those that are just that have one kind of device in one area, so it's converging. So the companies that are successful, like Samsung, they're producing mobile phones, they're producing tablets, they're producing smartphones, they're producing TVs, and they're joining this together. And companies that can't join this together and have a story to tell consumers that is joined up are going to struggle in next year.
So it's a great world for giants, basically.
But then amongst those giants, the idea is that there's going to be ecosystems that third-party developers can exploit, and those giants are going to be dependent on those companies.
You work a lot with developers and programmers and things. Do you think there's a role for the small person?
The thing that worries me the most, and I have no idea what the answer is to this, and I don't know that anybody knows what the answer is to this, is that everybody, consumers of technology, expect stuff to be either free or very, very low cost. And for everything, as soon as they start interacting digitally, and that isn't sustainable. So new business models do need to be found, and I can't see them being found at the moment. And I think
how the big tech giants answer that is basically by leveraging other businesses that they have that make money to deliver things cheaper. So this is why it's a game for giants, not minnows, because you have a company like Amazon that can produce a cheap tablet because they're using their content sales and retail sales to offset against losses, and this is what we see. So Google's ad revenue allows them to deliver free services in other areas because of that, and it becomes very hard for companies that previously made money in that area to then make money, to compete. So
final thought from you, Will.
I would agree there that you know, Google are essentially an ad company. Android is an ad delivery platform. Kindle Fire, yeah, it's a media consumption device for a media company. So I think you're seeing a differentiation between media consumption devices and the traditional idea of the PC. I think they're quite different, and I think probably the big story for next year is media consumption.